We're coming back now with a new panel. This is focused on accelerators and basically looking from the founder's perspective. We want to find out about how should the founder evaluate an accelerator? How should we pick to which accelerators to apply and actually to whom we should work out more in order to be accepted. And we have two guests here, Marco from Techstars and Marvin Liao from 500 Startups. And I think the first point of our, the first question is actually to tell us a few words about yourselves, your experience, and also Techstars and 500 Startups.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Marco. I'm the program director at Techstars London. Back in the day, so I come from Croatia, so not far away from here. I've been now in London for the last 4 years, primarily as an associate, and then as a program manager, and now a director of Techstars London. So I've been in kind of my career. I started in Zagreb, helped start the first incubator there. Zip, worked with Netokracija, then basically transitioned into Techstars, where I ran now 5 programs so far, and yeah, co-invested in 30, 40 companies.
So my background, Marvin from 500 Startups. I've been in Silicon Valley now, San Francisco for almost 20 years now. Did startups for a couple years, was executive at Yahoo for 10.5 years. I did a couple years of angel investing, and now I've been at 500 5 years now. It'll be 5 years in January. And so I started the San Francisco office, have run 11 batches now, and I've had 375 companies actually go through my program over the last 5 years. So yeah, that's right.
What's the difference between 500 Startups and Techstars in terms of model?
Besides being better,
we're definitely better.
You know, we're much better. But except for that, I mean, there's a location thing that we're based in San Francisco. You guys are everywhere, everywhere else. It feels like. I'll let you answer.
Yeah, so I think the geography is definitely kind of one of the differentiators. We have 45 programs across the world, so apart from London, there's a presence in Oslo, in Paris, in Berlin, in Munich, in Lisbon, in Amsterdam. There's a couple of more coming, and then the rest is kind of US, Dubai, Singapore. So a lot of kind of presence where we actually do programs, so kind of 10 companies per program pretty much per year. I think that's number one. In terms of the stages, it is pretty much the same, so it's kind of seed stage.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, generally seed stage. I would say also the focuses, I think, of our program are slightly different. And like in many ways, I think, and we're very close with a lot of the Techstars folks, you know, particularly at the senior levels. Culturally, I think like very similar in general, you know, founder friendly. You know, we think that it's mentor driven as well too. I would say we probably take a little bit more of a harder edge toward our companies. So I would say we're founder friendly, but we're also much more, how should I say, we push our companies and we're harder on our companies in general. And also I think that there's more of a customer acquisition focus for our program versus I would say you guys are probably a lot more generalist.
Yeah, I think, I mean, and well, we've seen that in London with the distro program as well. One of the things that 500 does really well, and I'm pitching them now, is basically distribution, and I think they do that really, really well.
And if we think about the teams, what kind of teams are you actually looking into? Are you focusing on specific verticals, or you have preferences in technologies, or you have preferences in, I don't know, startups which are, okay, moving quite fast in terms of market, but also having the technology, like a deep tech part. Do you shift, because I know you've shifted the focus in the past years, like bit by bit evolving together with the market. What is the standard, the focus now, the clear focus that you have now?
Yeah. So from our side, we've always, when I first joined the program, it tended to be more consumer focused. And that's, I would say, definitely over the last like 3 years, we've seen a big shift. And I think it's due to the market, not necessarily us, of a lot more like B2B enterprise. We've definitely seen that. And also I think from a stage, especially as we've spent a lot more time focusing on the customer acquisition, sales, marketing, you know, we lean more toward a little bit more of a later stage company. So it's very, very rare that we'll take in like a pre-launch company, right? I would say there are circumstances, for example, in highly regulated industries like digital health and fintech, we will do like pre-launch companies, but almost every other industry, we like to see some working product in general, because the way I think about it is if you are not at the right stage, our program is just not going to be very helpful, right? Especially with such a focus on sales and marketing. You're like, great, you're here for 3.5 months. You're learning a bunch of stuff that you actually can't really apply for like 6 or 9 months when you really should be focusing on the product. And so that's, at least for us, and I say sectors, we're sector agnostic in general, but definitely doing a lot more deep tech stuff as well too. So we have a jet plane company actually in this present batch right now. And we're definitely, we're doing a lot of stuff.
Are you using it as well?
Early. It's that one's like pre-launch, of course, right? So
Not safe yet.
yeah, not yet.
Yeah, so I think kind of quite similar. So we're also sector agnostic, depends kind of on the program. So there are corporate niches that are, fintech and automotive and energy, or all the other kind of niches. But we're also sector agnostic, but from the kind of stage perspective, it is early stage. And I think with us, kind of that means, from just an idea stage, so without a product, to an MVP, to a product, to having 10, 20, 30K monthly recurring revenue, to up to 1 million users on the platform, to probably raise, up to 1 million, 1.5 million. That's kind of the early stage, but what we really, really try to focus on are people, because, and then if you kind of walk backwards, a person who potentially has sold a company already, has an amazing background, like we can believe that that person, even without a product and even without traction, will be the right person for that idea, and will know then, and with a lot of help from our side, obviously, will know what to kind of do later. So yeah.
So if I would be a founder, then how could I test, or how could I find out if my startup is a fit for for the accelerator? I mean, besides what I do as a startup, the product itself.
I mean, there's a couple things, right? Like as you're evaluating programs in general, most of us, we talk to founders and stuff all the time. Try to get an introduction to us. We'll meet and talk with you just to, a lot of times we're building deal flow as well too. But I would say the other thing, which is just good practice in general, which is part of the evaluation process of looking at programs. I also talk to founders that have actually gone through the recent programs, and you'll get a good flavor on the type of companies and whether you're fit or not, right? Because I also think there's a big cultural fit that you have to sort of look for of what you're looking for in a program, right? So, and I know that's one of the questions, but from an evaluation perspective, you really want to do your homework and do reference checks. In my view, I think doing reference checks are actually important, of talking to previous founders who've gone through that specific program with that specific program director.
Yeah, you're gonna sign yourself up for 3 months of, something probably the most intense 3 months of your life if you haven't gone to military. And I think, you need to know what you're gonna get out of it, and you need to do the background checks. You need to talk to founders. You need to talk to investors that invested in those companies potentially later. Kind of the ecosystem. Talk to the mentors. We keep, and I'm quite sure you guys do as well, it's quite transparent on the website, from the mentors, from the corporate side to us who are actually running the program. And I think, inboxes are a mess for a reason, because people do reach out and they find us, and then we reply, and then we get in touch. So yeah, definitely kind of reach out to everyone, and I'm quite sure it is quite an ecosystem that's quite acceptive to being able to provide help, and everyone picks up the phone, and at least in my experience, everyone picks up the phone and helps one another. So definitely do that.
Speaking of corporates, basically what happened in the last 2-3 years, that there was a boom in corporate accelerators. How do you see this trend, and how is it matching with what are you doing, like the traditional, let's call them traditional accelerators? Do you see them as a competition or something that is complementary that you can use as well?
I think it's a trend. I don't think it's a great trend, not from a competitive perspective, because the reality is that most of the corporate accelerators suck, right? They're not well run. They're not committed. They're not committing to them for a long period of time. And so even if you look at, and there's ways that they can do it, right? I think that if they partner with folks they've done a lot of stuff with Techstars, for example. We've helped with some corporate accelerators. In general, I think that it is going to continue to be a trend. The problem, I think, that it takes, my view is that it takes at least 3 or 4 programs before you know what you're doing. And I think the unfortunate part with a lot of the corporate accelerators, they'll do like 1 or 2 of them, and then they'll just, you know what, this like costs too much money, we're not seeing results already. And so they tend to shut them down very, very quickly. And so I don't look at them as competition, because I think one of the challenges is that if a well-run corporate accelerator can add a lot of value. Fortunately, at least from a competitive perspective, most of them are not well-run. And so I don't worry about it.
And that's true. I think you know, from the corporate perspective, you have corporates that go into, you know, organizing an accelerator without knowing what to do, and the whole thing. So one of the first corporate accelerators that Techstars ran was with Barclays, and the whole kind of when I say corporate accelerator, so we run the program because we know, at least believe we know what we're doing. And then the corporate partner comes and says, hey, can you run the program for us? And there will be kind of some rules, there will be kind of a niche, we'll look at fintech, or we'll look at, you know, a particular other niche, and we'll bring the experience and the expertise of that corporate partner for the benefit of the founders that come in. But the program in the structure and in the, you know, running of the things is primarily our thing. So I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, across the board, you can see kind of the impatience of the corporates, and yeah, like if it's not tomorrow, then, you know, it doesn't work, and there can be a mismatch between kind of seed companies that, you know, that the corporate thinks will be able to do a pilot tomorrow, and there's just going to be, you know, time will be needed until that seed company comes to a stage where they actually have a product, where they actually have a working product that they'll be able to, you know, distribute into a bank and go through the whole due diligence process. So it just takes time. But yeah, I think from there's definitely a lot of corporate programs kind of out there, and you know, some are run better and some are not.
I would say Barclays is probably one of the very few corporates where they're in year 4 or 5 now? 5, right? So that's pretty rare. Like, I can't point to any other program that is, or any other corporate that has actually been like that consistent. And so you go 5 times, like, that's probably 10.
Yeah,
10 programs.
Yeah. So it's been it's London, it's Tel Aviv, it's New York, and there's probably like 150 companies now. Yeah.
Coming back to the acceleration batches that you had, and seeing the most effective startups, the best ones which were actually taking the most out of the acceleration period, what were the key things that they were doing, and you'd advise other founders to do during the acceleration time?
So for me, I think like founders who kind of come in with a very, very clear plan on what they want, founders who actually have very, very specific goals and very, very specific metrics that they're looking at, like every day, every single week, and also just leveraging, so I have one founder that just, and they're very, very successful company now. She was just a great founder because just how she was able to, you know, leverage at least all the key mentors and just even build a filter through all the noise sometimes, right? So, for example, like, she would go to the talks that actually made sense. She wouldn't go to all of them. She'd go to the ones that actually make sense. You know, it's so easy to go and say, I want to talk to every single one of the mentors. And we have like 200 mentors or whatever. It's just like, you can get so busy and just sort of like going to the talks, meeting every single mentor, you know, like just kind of taking advantage of all that stuff, which is good. You want to do that, but I think you want to be thoughtful. And so I think the best founders are actually goal-driven, but also thoughtful about how they leverage the resources and not go to everything, right? Sometimes it doesn't make sense to do everything, versus sort of the opposite, which is like they get to the program, but they don't take advantage of anything. Like, that's also stupid too.
Yeah, I'd say, well, I agree with, well, kind of the things Marvin said. I think kind of a lot of things are also down to kind of how humble the founder is. Like, there will be a number of opportunities to get feedback and advice that you won't necessarily like, and that, you know, you won't necessarily think well about, but you'll potentially and hopefully bring that on board and look at all the kind of angles and actually then make a decision. And it takes a lot of, I think, humbleness and self-awareness to be actually able to do that. I think the second thing is, when you do sign up for one of these things, it will be hard, and I think it will be intense, and it will be long hours, and there will be a lot of resources and contacts and everyone, kind of relationships, that you'll be able to build across those 3 months. And then just not taking full opportunity, full advantage of that is just stupid. And eventually, like, you don't want after demo day or a month after the program finishes to be like, oh shit, like if only I could have talked to that person, and can I ask for more intros now? And it's like, well, the program was what the program was. Sure, we can help, but why didn't you make that earlier?
I think a good founder has a strong point of view that's like open-minded, right? Like you go to this program to get access to people, to experts, to really push you, right? To push your point of view and your approach. And I think you have to have a strong view on and vision of sort of what you want to build. But I also think you have to have the courage also go and say like, wow, like a bunch of people are telling me this, and it goes against sort of like what I originally thought was right. You sort of need to be able to sort of like measure sort of like, well, maybe is that the right direction or not? And so sort of like the coachability, but like not be too coachable as well, because it's so easy to get like mental whiplash of having 4 or 5 people tell you very different things, and it can be very confusing because these are all very credible, and you're like, wow, these all kind of make sense. So being decisive, I think, is also being able to filter and be decisive to just sometimes make that decision and be prepared to be wrong. That's okay too.
We're almost out of time. We can take one question from the public.
Okay, so first, thank you very much for being here. For me, it's amazing to be in a room with such people. And I'd like to ask you, from your vast experience, what is the one favorite startup of yours that you put your hands on, and why?
That's hard. Go for it.
I think it's so. You'll say your story, but I think it's very hard to pick just one. I think it's, those companies were chosen for a reason, and in a way, like, because it's so sector agnostic, it's so different, and eventually and initially, we choose on the people. It's hard to pick one. I can give a number of examples. We had companies from Eastern Europe that were so humble, that were so coachable, that really wanted to get the most out of the program, and that's those founders, those companies are a pleasure to work with, because they listen, they progress, and then at the end of the program, you're able to see, oh, this company was here, and now this is what they got out of the program, and it's quite clear, like all the KPIs and the goals are there. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Yes, it's kind of like you kind of love like all your children, right? So it's very hard to pick favorite. I mean, you have favorites, right? And I think a lot of them, like I can name some companies like Big Finit. He's a Spanish founder, came to the program and really pushed me. Like during the whole program, was just like, why am I doing this? He's a very successful founder before, but he had never done a VC funded startup, and that was just a good experience because he pushes you. The older founder sold his last company for several $100 million, and he's like, why am I doing this? But at the end, he was like, oh, I'm really, really glad I did this, and has now become sort of one of our biggest sort of proponents everywhere he goes, right? Another company, Shippo, Laura, young founder, she's now 26 or 27 now, but when she joined my program back 5 years ago, but just really hungry, super smart, and just mature, right? Like she was at 22, 23 at that point. Like these are the ones that stand out, where just like, and just super smart about just the approach, and just like, not just even coachability, but just the decisiveness of just going and asking for a lot of people's opinions, but be willing to sort of like make her own decisions. And now she's raised, I think, $35–40 million. Their business is profitable. They have like about 100 people working for them, growing like crazy. And it's like, wow, like this is like a 26, 27, like way smarter than, way more successful than I'll ever be. And to think that you had a little bit of impact, at least in the early days, is like a wonderful experience, which is why I think most of us doing this. It's not for the money, I can tell you.
Okay, thanks a lot.